You're in? Okay. Hello, hello, folks. Hello, hello. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm just assigning our TAs, co-host, so they can manage the waiting room. Navigate chat for us. Hannah, will you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have helmet hair riding my bike. This is my favorite blouse. I think this is the coolest blouse ever. I just love the fabric. I know. Thank you. I appreciate that. I even, brushed my teeth for y'all. I don't have chapstick on though. Well, in case you've forgotten what we do, this is what we do. We get our seating set up. We navigate that space to make sure everybody knows where we were at and when we were there, right? Not that the iPhone doesn't already track us everywhere we go, but that's not a conspiracy theory. That's real. It is really real. And of course, I know we've got people still coming in. We're still about a minute till. Here's our where are you now seating. I have our exit ticket for today set up to ask you guys about face-to-face versus checking in remotely and what might be some of your motivations to do that. Boy, this is the last minute ever. Oh, look, I still had an earbud in. I was like, why is it so hard to hear? That's funny. Funny, funny, funny. Okay. Welcome, everybody. If you're still coming in, I'm only showing 77 of 93 participants having logged in or locked in, letting us know where you're at as far as the poll on Blackboard, and then, of course, completing the seating survey. I was just talking about how on today's exit ticket, I've asked you a couple questions about where you're sitting, not where you're sitting, but if you're physically attending class versus being virtual and some of the logic that it went into that. Because if I'm, if we're in a similar circumstance next fall, I would re-envision this a different way. I would have a class of 25 students that could actually talk to each other face to face. And then at the same time, allow a remote class of like 250 for those people that would want to zoom in on the experience and then hop into breakout rooms. To me, this feels like a tremendous, not waste of space. I mean, this was an experiment. We obviously have never had to do anything like this before, but now that we're in it, I want to be as informed as possible so I can be empowered to make good, thoughtful, and careful decisions, especially for students. If the remote option is so attractive, given our limitations on being face-to-face, then I would opt into remote. Just, just as a thought. We are in our 8th week, 2nd day, talking about social influence. We're not going to get to relationships. We're going to talk a little bit more. We got to finish up a few social cognition topics. And then we're going to talk about social influence. But for those of you that haven't been paying attention, hello. We have like 2 days left of class. Yeah, we're meeting next week, Monday and Wednesday. And then for the 10th week, you guys are taking your final on Wednesday. And then on Monday, the TAs and I are going to be setting up and posting an announcement where anybody can sign up during our regularly scheduled class time on Monday of the 10th week to meet with us. I know this is a guaranteed time that you actually have and that you can meet. So we kind of did a little bit of the math and it looks like we have almost like 100 time slots. So I am very confident that we'll be able to serve everybody. We'll have you guys go ahead and sign up on those. We'll get that posted next week. So you can do that. And we're really envisioning this hour, right, as kind of not a study session, but an opportunity for you to come and ask us questions about preparing for the final. Alrighty, that's what we plan on using that time for. Today, we're going to be talking about the bystander effect. No, we might wait until Monday to talk about the bystander effect. There's so much to talk about in social psych that really getting to experience this. Now, social psychology is where some of our most iconic psychological experiments have happened. You guys are going to get to watch a video on one of them today, which means we're going to be doing a little less talking to each other, but we're gonna get to watch a video and sort of debrief that at the group level. We're also going to be talking about how relationships. We won't be getting to relationships until next week, that's for sure. But on Monday, we'll be wrapping up social influence, starting relationships, or just finishing out social influence, and then we'll do relationships on Wednesday, just to give you a little bit of a lay of the land. If you have just hopped into class, will you please make sure and do the poll that I have posted, just letting me know if you are in the arena or if you are remote. I would appreciate that. As always, starting off with your questions from last week. Pardon me, from Monday, not last week. Now I have a TA that screens all of the questions that gets asked and just kind of looks for repeats, and that's why they're called FAQs, or frequently asked questions. In what ways does self-serving bias benefit us? It allows us to feel good about ourselves, right? When something happens and we're struggling with it, I think my mask is upside down. Nobody panic. And I'll just leave it upside down. When something happens and we're struggling with the outcome, self-serving bias is kind of a way for us to stay feeling good about ourselves. Now, that benefits us in some ways, but it also costs us in others, right? And it costs us, we have some reality distortion. It can also be one of the things that can lead us down a slightly darker path, maybe towards a more narcissistic behavior. Now, one of the things that I have noticed, okay, one of the things that I have noticed is that our culture today is using the word narcissist a lot. And I think it's important for me to make the distinction between an actual diagnosed personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, versus somebody who's just selfish and self-centered. Okay. We all know I am a frequenter of TikTok, and I'm just shocked by the amount of like narcissist content that there is on there right now, identifying stuff. And as a psychologist, I'm like, well, that's not actually accurate. All right, that's just selfish and self-centered. And sometimes that selfishness and that self-centeredness, what might look like narcissism, is actually alcoholism, unchecked alcoholism. Where the belief is that people are generally here at my disposal and to serve me. And there's definitely that cognitive perspective for a lot of alcoholics. And so when we talk about comorbidity, sometimes I've never actually seen this, but there are carryover symptoms or similar symptoms. Like if you think about a Venn diagram, like if this is alcoholism and this self-centered aspect, and this is narcissistic personality disorder, there's some behaviors that actually overlap or are alike. So self-serving bias kind of, it protects our ego a little bit, and a little bit of self-serving bias is great, right? It's absolutely great. It can be very effective and very necessary. But too much of it can cost, right? It can definitely take its toll. How can we recognize bias in ourselves? Oh, I got to turn this mask around. Here's the straight truth. You're biased. You're biased, period. Of course you're biased. Your entire cognitive construct of the world was built around your life experiences. Have you had all of the experiences? Absolutely not. You are biased, okay? One of the ways that we can see bias is when we start to look at our expectations and assumptions of others, okay? our expectations and assumptions of others, right? And how far we carry those. You're biased in your favorite sports team. And by the way, your bias in your favorite sports team prejudices you against colors, right? Not racial colors, not skin colors, but actual colors, I'm a huge Boise State fan, right? Of all Boise State sports. But I can't, I'm so over the orange and blue combo. Like I'm done. I used to pick my favorite teams based upon their color schemes. It's real. It's real. But bias is everywhere. And the important thing to know is that it is everywhere and it's okay. Right? But you got to check yourself. You got to check yourself before that bias spills into stereotyping, which then becomes prejudice, which then can become discrimination. Okay? It's a slippery slope. So recognizing bias, look for judgment. Look for quality assumptions, look for changes in expectations. It's the case that when students take abnormal psychology is required by a lot of health majors. And it's also, something that a lot of psych majors want to take. It's pretty cool. As a professor in that class, right, because it was an upper division class and it was so intensive, my bias was towards psych majors because they had been studying psychology all along. So their questions, their nuance, like everything was deeper and different than the students that were in a health services field interest. So one of the ways that I had to balance that out, and I didn't know that I had that bias until I, wrote a question one day and I was like, oh God, well, really, psych majors can answer this question pretty adept, but this one's going to be a struggle for students that aren't in that area. So staying aware, letting people look at your stuff, right? Letting people look at your stuff. I have people that look at my syllabi. I have my TAs review a lot of my assignments. I have them make decisions with me, like broadening that scope and touching base with other people in your perceptions and experiences are all great ways to help yourself recognize bias in yourself. How has social media contributed to individualistic culture around the world? Has it made us more narcissistic and individualistic? I do not know. I do not research social media. And if Haley was in here right now, I would call upon Haley to answer that question. One of our TAs is doing research in that area right now. So I don't know. I know that social media is one of these confounding variables that really is not responsible for, but contributing to a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, some body dysmorphia. I mean, there's some pretty serious, for lack of a better term, negative outcomes associated with social media. And conversely, especially during this time, right, where we are so isolated from everybody else, having social media is a way, when used correctly, to connect. But how it's contributed to individualistic cultures and has it made people more narcissistic and individualistic? I can't speak to that. But that is a great question, right? That's a senior thesis. How can you limit negative or bad social influences? Oh, I'm not sure what context this person has for this question. Yeah, I'm not sure the context of this question. So in some ways, I can kind of see a double-edged sword here, in that if you are shutting yourself away from what you define as bad or negative social influences, you might actually just be perpetuating your own bias and discrimination. So it's difficult, right? So like, what's negative and what's bad? Like, I could think about glorified substance abuse culture, glorified eating disorders, glorified violence, things like that. I mean, that just has a lot to do with putting filters on things and, bypassing things. There's content that I don't care to see. So when I run across it on my Pinterest board, I put hide, right? Irrelevant content, not relevant to me. taking that time to actually sort of set that boundary electronically, it helps. It helps because it reinforces your own perspective. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that question. What is the difference between self-serving, probably self-serving bias and fundamental attribution error? Self-serving bias is focused on how I see me, right? Something bad happened. It's the other person's fault, right? I failed a test. It wasn't because I didn't study. It was the professor. The professor's an asshole. Fundamental attribution error, or the professor wrote a hard test. The fundamental attribution error is that I'm attributing other people's behavior to their character. The bias doesn't do that. The bias just says everything else is the reason why something didn't work out for me. It's kind of a shift in locus of control. The fundamental attribution error is when things go bad, and it happens to me, it's because of the context, which is part of self-serving bias. But the key to fundamental attribution error, and the reason why we call it an error, is that when you do participate in the same behavior, and I say, well, you did that because you're self-centered, you're selfish, you are egotistical, right? I blame that on your constitution. I don't give you the same grace to say that it's your context, of which I take for myself. So the fundamental attribution error is a little bit of self-serving bias, but has this whole other way that we attribute other people's behaviors. It's good stuff. We had lots of questions, by the way. How can people realize they're using the fundamental attribution error when having a conversation with somebody? You check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? You ask yourself, this is actually a compassion exercise that I have taught in my art and science of happiness class. Whenever you see somebody do something that you're just like, what in the ever loving hell were they thinking, right? If that's like your initial response to them, ask yourself, under what context would I do that? What situational factors would have to be present? What state of mind would I have to be in order for me to do that exact same thing? Now, you might have to get really creative and be a little silly in order to think of a reason or a situation or a way in which you would behave in that way. But doing that, it keeps you, right? It helps sort of keep them from falling prey to your fundamental attribution error. It's a really fascinating exercise, and I don't know, right? Because I can think of a lot of situations where those are not decisions I'd make, but I could imagine myself being in a very difficult situation. So I guess what I'm saying is that you dream up situational factors under which you would make the same decision. And if you're able to do that, right, that's going to increase your compassion score, right, and how you view other people. But it's also going to decrease your fundamental attribution error. What is the biggest difference between stereotyping, prejudice, and discriminations? We are escalating in our degree of impact on other people. If you stereotype, a stereotype's going to happen up here, right? The judgment's going to happen up here. And normally it is, right, it's about a subset, right? When you are prejudicial, you take that stereotype and you assign qualities to it. So what am I trying to think of? Snowboarders, right? We have such a bad rap. You know, snowboarders are inconsiderate on the ski hill, right? So you go into the locker room and you see somebody putting on snowboard boots and you think, snowboarders, right? Snowboarders are, that person must be a snowboarder. So the prejudicial comes in when I start to make assumptions about their motivations and qualities about their inherent value or decision making. And then the big issue, right, because we all have bias, right? So bias actually happens before all this, bias, stereotyping, prejudice. What happens in discrimination is that at this point, we are now withholding resources from others because of our perception of them, because of our prejudicial viewpoint, and because of our stereotyping. And discrimination is really the point at which it starts to significantly impact other people. You can stereotype. Prejudicial, though, that's when we start making global statements about groups of people. always in the negative, right? I mean, yeah, primarily in the negative. Because even if you are pro skier, then that must mean you're anti all others. So that still can have negative ramifications. Here's some course logistics. There will not be a study guide. There was no review scheduled. We don't have a review scheduled. What we are going to offer you, though, is the opportunity for you to come up with some good questions that you can bring to that sort of review hour and ask us your questions. We're not going to meet a large group. We'll just make ourselves available for those people who have questions about course content. We are also planning on posting some suggestions on how to study for the final for those of you who are new to college exams. The other resource that you can pull from is going to the academic advising and enhancement. They have a lot of information on how to study. They've created quite a few tutorials and videos on best practices for preparing for things like that. And yeah, I think if you're looking for a study guide, I would recommend looking through your concept checks. And if you've already taken the practice midterm, you can study from those as well. So those questions would be helpful. But anything from the semester is fair game. So to say that there's a study guide, I could just say, look at the book. That would be about as narrowed down as we're going to get it. Will the extra credit assignments count against your grade if you did not do them? Absolutely not. We have to have a points value in there right now. When I don't calculate the grades in Blackboard because Blackboard doesn't do it. It does it if you don't have drops and if you don't have all these other things, but we have drops and we have extra credit and all this other stuff. So when it comes time, I'll actually download the grade book into an Excel file and I will zero out the total points possible on those extra credits. So they do not contribute to your points value. And if you need clarification on that, you can look at Blackboard, look at our syllabus, look under the assessments section of the syllabus, and it has all of that information detailed there. Definitely use the Google Doc version of the syllabus. Don't hop on Blackboard and get into the Google Doc version because that's the one that is updated. Because we made some of the weekly things worth extra credit and everything else like that, all of the numbers have shifted. So that is going to be the place to go for information in order to be empowered in that area. Okay. All right. Is there a resource available that will show us how to use the Albertsons library database? Yeah, there's probably one on the Albertsons website. The librarians are incredibly helpful. If you've already taken a UF 100 class, then you should know how to use the library database. If you're currently in one, I don't know if that's coming up for you or not, but I know that the library has resources that you can use to get that information. All right, housekeeping. Study for your final. It's time. It's time. You guys are 2 weeks out from your final. It'll be offered during our regularly scheduled class time on October 28th. Okay, during our regularly scheduled class time, it's going to be offered on October 28th. So yes, please start studying for that final. Research option 1, new studies have posted. And I know that on there it says you have to sign up for time slots only available after October, whatever. Ignore that. There's no time slots. Sign up for the study anyway. Sign up for the study anyway, because that's not referring to what you think it's referring to. You think that it's referring to only a certain number of people can actually take it, and that's not the case. That's not the case. Practice midterm is a good tool for the final. I know that I've already said that. The great thing about the concept checks and the practice midterm is that you get the questions and you get all the answer options and you get how you answered. And I highly recommend you going through those after you take them and just look at them and ask yourself, like the ones that you get right, make sure you understand why you got them right based upon the content. And the ones that you got wrong, spend some time figuring out what led you to the answer that you chose. Understanding what logic you use to get to the wrong answer will also help you find the right answer. No, I don't tell you which is the right answer. The reason being is that typically students memorize questions and answers and think that that's a really great way to do it. Well, the thing, and I'm sure that some of you have already ran across this, the thing with our test bank is that they have the questions that are worded almost exactly the same and have like a subtle change. And that just becomes risky because then students are just matching like the tone of a question, and then they look for that answer. You've got to read every single question because you don't know what it's asking until you read actually the whole question. And your last weekly essay opens up after this exam. I mean, after class today. Like, holy stokes a lot, right? You guys are done taking concept checks. This will be your last weekly essay. It's due Friday night for full credit. You have until Sunday to submit it. Yes. No, I will not make right answers available for review purposes. I want you to use it as a learning tool for yourself. When you're empowered with all of the question and you're empowered with all of the answers, and you have the textbook in your notes, you will come to the right answer given some time and interest. Actually, we don't have, I think, we do have a Unit 4 essay. That is correct. Okay. Yes, did I say essay? Oh my gosh, yes, that is weekly summary. Thank you for catching that. I'm sorry for the confusion on that. I want to fix it right now so it doesn't make everybody too crazy. Yes, yes, yes. It's a weekly summary, not the weekly essay. I appreciate that catch. Okay. Any other housekeeping? I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat.
I think Kylo is wondering if we get an overall score for the midterm when it's finished, or just get to see which questions are correct or incorrect.
I think because I have it zeroed out, I don't think that you get an overall score. You need to go in and look at each individual question. When you go in to access it, and it'll show you all the questions, it should have a summary of your performance across the top, how long it took you, when you started it, when you stopped it, and it should show you your response rate. But it's not going to show a percentage in the grade book. I can manage, right, a couple weekly summaries at 15 points each, but you guys seeing something in the grade book worth 75, 80 points that you haven't accounted for. Yeah. The unit essay will be due it'll be active next week on the 21st. So it'll be due on the 25th. What can I say about the last unit essay? It's about social psychology. I know that wasn't really helpful. I don't have anything to say about it yet, and I'll be really honest with you. I don't even know if I've written the question down yet. It's true. Awesome. All right, anything else? Rachel said that they had never gotten feedback on their Unit 2 essay. So your feedback is in your grade book. If you scored above average, or if you scored average or above, we didn't provide any additional feedback. So you want to look at the rubric to see where you scored, right, relative to the average, superior, distinguished, and max points columns. That way you have that. I believe that for the 10-week, I actually have to get essay grades. Yeah, you will get your Unit 3 essay grades in time for you to complete your Unit 4 essay. All right. All right, I'm going to call that quits for housekeeping, and I'm keeping my eye on the chat. All right, I'm going to send you into some breakouts. What I want you to do is I want you to talk about which test you took. You had the opportunity to take a test on connection, forgiveness, and social capital. You could have done one or all of those, just depending upon what you were interested in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you out into a breakout. And what I want you to be able to report out on for yourself at the very least is hopefully you'll get into a group where there's at least one other person that completed a survey that wasn't like yours. And you could talk a little bit about the types of questions that were asked, and then also your own results and what you think of those results, right? Are they true of you? Are they not true of you? What are you going to do with that information, if anything? All right. There you go. Head into your breakout rooms, and I will give you guys 1 minute's notice when it's time for y'all to come back. Thank you, Hannah, for putting in the topic. You're awesome.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
would you be able to send another student into room 33? It was just me and one girl, and I want her to talk to someone that did the quiz.
That what? Oh, that did the
did
quiz.
the quiz. Yeah.
We got Skylar, Austin, and Haley Fondren. You know, you could just, I don't know if you can hop back in there.
Yeah, I can try.
What room were they in?
33.
33. I am just gonna assign them to a different room. How about that?
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Meg, would you just keep an eye on the students that don't actually go anywhere and that stay in this main room so we can just account for their engagement? Thanks.
For sure.
I was in room 18 and I was the only one in there.
Okay, Meg, let me see if I can. Okay. I'm gonna send you to another room.
I never got assigned a breakout room, and I'm still in here as well.
Okay, well, I think that what you need to do is you actually need to do a little bit of investigation on your Zoom, because those alerts are coming through, but they might be getting hidden behind a web page that you have open or something else that you have open. If you go on to your control for Zoom and you click on that, oftentimes it'll show you the room that you were supposed to be sent to.
Oh yeah. So this actually happens in a few classes. What happened was Zoom did an update like a little over a week ago, and everyone that's using a Chromebook isn't able to access all of its features on Zoom. It kind of blocked it for Chromebooks.
That explains it. I'm using the Chromebook.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well, why don't you guys just go ahead and have that conversation here then?
all right. Yeah.
Hey, Meg, will you go ahead and hide your video? Thanks.
All right. So, what quiz did you guys do?
I did the I think the humanistic. I'm trying to pull it up. My computer's being really slow. Like the humanity one.
Okay. Yeah. I did not do that one.
I wasn't super surprised by the results, just because like it was basically saying like you care about the world as a whole rather than like specific countries, states, or yourself. And like I feel like that's pretty accurate for me.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. I did the social capital quiz. I mainly chose it because I saw social capital and I had no clue what it meant. So that made me want to take it. And my results were set out a lot of people I can work with in real life, but I guess a stronger connection to people in real life than on a social aspect or social media or online aspect. Which I totally agree with. I agreed with those results because I'm not a big fan of much social media or any of that stuff really. So, yeah, that was basically what I got from that quiz.
Something I learned from the quiz I took, it was really interesting to me. it was talking about how people who care about the world as a whole more than like any other like factor tend to be like more anxious and stressed about things out of their control, and I would say that's very accurate for me.
Mm.
Because like I would just want like, you know, like everyone to get along and stuff like that, and it's just like it's frustrating sometimes like looking at the news and being like, well, I can't do anything, I'm just one person.
Yeah.
And I just felt like that was really accurate to my actual personality.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That's interesting. Mm. Um,
All right, folks. Thank you. Thank you. I think when we talk about social psychology, we talk about relating, we talk about influence, we talk about how we think about others. One of the things that we see as being one of the biggest contributors to marital relationships, to parent-child relationships, is forgiveness, right? Is definitely forgiveness. Social capital and connection all play a role as well. When we talk about PERMA, and the R in PERMA representing relationships. And so having you guys just sort of dip your toe in the water on that aspect of relationships was something that I was kind of excited to do. And as I just told you before, I teach this class called Art and Science of Happiness, where we are always taking these scientifically supported surveys that really have to do with, you know, statistically supporting or validating the resources that you have in your life and hopefully helping you find ways to capitalize on it. Okay. When we left off, we were talking about the fundamental attribution error. We were talking about self-serving bias, and we had just briefly touched on the just world phenomenon. And remember, that's not like karma, right? Just world phenomenon means that when you believe that when people do bad shit's going to happen to them, which is definitely very different from karma. What we didn't get to talk about on Monday is social roles, norms, and scripts. These are all so central and so vital to our success. And now in our culture, we are really seeing this push to say, let's get rid of those, right? Let's get rid of norms. Let's get rid of norms that women wear bras. Let's get rid of the norm that men don't wear skirts. Let's get rid of the norm of male and female. Social roles, though, kind of give us a way to anticipate interactions and allows us to make certain assumptions about what we can expect and not expect from other people. And that's actually one of the things that makes people so vulnerable when it comes to gender ambiguity or somebody who is non-binary. They really, really struggle with not being able to anticipate, right? Like, I just don't even know how to interact with you. Because you don't conform to one of those two dichotomous behavior patterns and expectations. Traditionally, people who have that mindset are also the individuals that find it weird when women are in construction, right? Again, back to those social norms, gender roles, and the scripts that we have for each gender. We're going to talk about Zimbardo. I'm going to let you guys watch that video here in just a sec. But believe it or not, Zimbardo actually falls under a lot of stuff, right? He falls under conformity. He falls under the study of evil. I mean, there was so much that happened. Today, the Stanford prison experience could not happen, right? Like it could not happen today. But really the idea of this is he wanted to put these people into different roles, and he wanted to see how long it would take for them to adopt scripts and to adopt the persona and to adopt all those social norms that we come to expect from these individuals. And so this little summary by the BBC is pretty fascinating. Enjoy.
Beds, I felt it was like the day in summer
You guys hear
camp.
it? Meg, can you give me a thumbs up?
The first day, I said, this might be
That's
very
not where we
long,
wanna start.
very boring.
Why won't this go away? Oh, mother of pearl. Okay, there we go.
Dr. Henderson, I think the video muted when you muted yourself.
I gotta go to a doctor, anything. Jesus Christ, I'm burning up inside, don't you know?
I've never screamed so loud in my life. Never been so upset in my life. It was an experience of being out of control.
This is fucking Vegas.
Stanford University, Northern California, one of America's most prestigious academic institutions, and in 1971, the scene of one of the most notorious experiments in the history of psychology.
I was interested in what happens if you put good people in an evil place. Does the situation outside of you, the institution, come to control your behavior, or does the things inside of you, your attitudes, your values, your morality, allow you to rise above a negative environment?
The negative environment Zimbardo chose to test his ideas was a prison. He would convert the basement of the university's psychology department into a subterranean jail.
We put prison doors on each of 3 office cells. In the cells, there was nothing but 3 beds, and there was actually very little room for anything else because they were very small. And here we had solitary confinement, which we call the hole. And in the hole was the place where prisoners would be put for punishment. It was a very, very small area. When you closed the door, it was totally dark. All the guards wore military uniforms, and we had them wear these silver reflecting sunglasses. And what it does is you can't see someone's eyes, and so that loses some of the humanness, the humanity. In general, we wanted to create a sense of power. That is, the guards, as a category, are people who have power over others. In this case, power over the prisoners.
A decade earlier, psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you was which, please? Teacher.
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud, horse, rock, house. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer, horse. Experiment. That's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go in. Let me out.
The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called sharks harmless.
You're gonna get a shot. 180 volts.
Ow! I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Stand it. I'm not gonna kill that man there. I mean, who's gonna take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next with slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering a less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis. Like Milgram, Zimbardo was interested in the power of social situations to overwhelm individuals. His experiment would test people's responses to an oppressive regime. Would they accept it or act against it? Zimbardo's experiment was conducted against a backdrop of civil rights activism and protest against the Vietnam War.
There was a sense of student power, student dominance, and student rebellion against authority in general.
It was from the student body that Zimbardo selected his participants. After passing tests to screen out anyone with a psychological abnormality, they were paid $15 a day. Each was randomly assigned to the role of guard or prisoner.
It was a prison to me. It still is a prison to me. I don't look on it as an experiment or a simulation. It's just a prison that was run by psychologists instead of run by the state.
I was 20, and that September I was going to college, and it would be nice to have a summer job, but there sure wasn't a lot of time left. And I looked in the want ads, and I found this thing which was just going to fit. It was just 2 weeks.
Once you put a uniform on and are given a job to keep these people in line, you really become that person. Once you put on that khaki uniform, you put on the glasses, you take the nightstick.
I was on summer break from my first year in college, and I was looking for a job. Had to choose between that and making pizzas. That sounded like a lot more fun.
As well as running the experiment, Zimbardo took on the role of prison superintendent. He began by briefing the guards.
I said, you have to maintain law and order. If prisoners escape, the study is over, and you can't use physical violence.
You can create a sense of fear in them. You can create the notion that their life is totally controlled by us, and that there'll be constant surveillance. We have total power in the situation, and they have none.
Prisoners were brought to the basement prison blindfolded to confuse them about their whereabouts. They were stripped and deloused.
Of course, the guards started making fun of their genitals and humiliating them. And really, it's a start of what's known as the degradation process, which not only prisons, but lots of military-type outfits use that process.
When I first got here, even though I had to strip, they would call me names. I still didn't feel at all like I was in prison. I was just looking at it as a job.
I recall sort of walking up and down the very short hallway, which was the prison hall, and looking in on the prisoners, and they're basically lounging around on their beds. I felt it was like a day in summer camp.
The first day I said, this might be a very long, very boring experiment because it's conceivable nothing will happen.
I arrived independently at the conclusion that this experiment must have been put together to prove a point about prisons being a cruel and inhumane place, and therefore I would do my part, to help those results come about. I was a confrontational and arrogant 18-year-old at the time, and I said somebody ought to stir things up a bit here.
On the second morning, the prisoners had decided to stir things up as well. The guards found some of them had used their beds to barricade their cell. Prisoner 8612 was one of the ringleaders of the rebellion.
Initially, I was stunned. I didn't expect a rebellion because not much happened. I mean, it wasn't clear what they were rebelling against, but they were rebelling against the status, rebelling against being anonymous, against having to follow orders from these other students.
As punishment for the rebellion, prisoner 8612 was put in the hole, and the guards turned on the other prisoners.
The guards felt that they now have to up the ante of being tough. The prisoners made the mistake of beginning to use profanity against the guards in a very personalized way. So not against the guards, but, you know, you little punk, you big shit, and so, and the guards got furious.
Everybody out! Well, gentlemen, here it is time for count.
Prisoners were repeatedly woken in the middle of the night. The guards made them do menial, physical tasks and clean out toilets with their bare hands.
We made it a point to not give them any sense of comfort or what to expect, that, that anything could happen to them at any time, including being rousted from their sleep at any hour and forced to stand up in a line and have me hurl insults at them and make them do exercises. When you interrupt people's sleep, they tend to become a little disoriented. And since there was no daylight in the prison, they had no idea whether it was night or day. I think that I was the instigator of this whole schedule of harassment.
The harassment of the guards took its toll on rebellion leader 8612. He told Zimbardo he wanted to leave the experiment. Zimbardo responded not as a psychologist, but as a prison superintendent.
I said, well, I can see to it the guards don't hassle you personally. And in return, all I would like is some information from time to time about what the prisoners are doing. So essentially, I'm saying I'd like you to be a snitch, an informer. And I said, think it over, and if you still want to leave, fine.
Confused, prisoner 8612 returned to his cell and told the other prisoners that no one could leave.
He believed that we wouldn't let him go, although we've never said that. But the fact that he was the ringleader of the rebellion and he told the other prisoners they won't let you leave, and that really transformed the experiment into a prison.
I was told that I couldn't quit. And at that point, I just felt totally hopeless. More hopeless than I'd ever felt before.
Soon after returning to his cell, prisoner 8612 started showing signs of severe distress.
God damn it! Fucked up! You don't know! I mean, God! I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm burning up inside, don't you know? I just fucking can't take it.
He came up with a plan that if he acted crazy, we would have to release him.
I'm so fucked up inside. I feel really fucked up inside. You don't know. I gotta go. To a doctor, anything. I can't see them. I'm fucked up. I don't know how to explain it. I'm fucked up inside. Hell out! Hell out now!
It starts with make-believe, and then he's doing it and cursing and screaming and, you know, whatever that little boundary is that he moved across. Not that he became really crazy, but he became, you know, excessively disturbed. I mean, so much so that we immediately said we have to release him.
As an experience, it was unique. I've never screamed so loud in my life. I've never been so upset in my life. And it was an experience of being out of control.
The boundary between reality and make-believe was to become blurred even for Zimbardo. A rumor circulated that released prisoner 8612 would return with friends to liberate the remaining prisoners.
I quickly convinced myself that, you know, my most important function was, you know, not to allow this prison liberation to occur. And what can I do to keep my prison going, not the experiment going?
The prison was dismantled and the prisoners moved to another part of the building. Zimbardo waited in the empty corridor, preparing to tell 8612 and his friends that the study was over, when a colleague appeared and began asking questions about the scientific basis of the research.
I'm trying to get rid of him. And then he says, what's the independent variable? I get furious because he doesn't understand that there's a riot about to take place, that this prison is about to erupt. I had totally lost this whole other identity of scientist, researcher, psychologist.
The rumored jailbreak never materialized. The guards had dismantled the prison for nothing and had to rebuild it. They took their frustration out on the prisoners.
They escalated again the level of control, the level of dominance, the level of humiliating behavior.
"819 was the next prisoner to rebel against the harassment of the guards. He barricaded himself in his cell and refused to take part in the count.
You're not only not getting a cigarette, but for as long as the cell's blockaded, you're going to be in solitary when you get out.
For 819's disobedience, the guards made his cellmates do mindless work. This undermined any vestige of solidarity amongst the prisoners, who now chose to accept the tyranny of the guards rather than risk further harassment.
That was one of the surprising things to me, is that there was so little that the prisoners did to support one another after we started our campaign of, divide and conquer.
Isolated and distraught, prisoner 819 told Zimbardo he wanted to leave.
While I'm interviewing 819 and saying, okay, it's all over. Thank you for your participation. I'll give you money for the whole 2 weeks, even though you're leaving early. He hears the prisoners shouting, 819 did a bad thing.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
And he said, I can't leave. And he's crying. And he says, I can't leave. So what do you mean you can't leave? He said, no, I have to go back because I don't want them to think that I'm a bad prisoner. And that's when I really flipped out. And in such a short time, a college student's thinking could become so distorted. I said, you're not a bad prisoner. You're not a prisoner. And this is not a prison. And it was this thing where he opened his eyes. It was just really like a cloud being lifted.
Seeing things clearly, prisoner 819 reverted to his original request and was released. To replace him, the experimenters called in one of their reserves from the standby list.
I got a phone call saying, are you still available as an alternate? Kind of cheery female secretary voice. I said, yes, sure. And so she said, could you start this afternoon? And I said, yes, sure. And my role in the experiment really began. I was blindfolded and then stripped and supposedly deloused.
He came into a madhouse, full blown. All of us had gradually acclimated to the increasing level of aggression, the increasing powerlessness of the prisoners, the increasing dominance of the guards. And he comes in and says, what's happening here to the other prison? And they said, yeah, you better not make trouble. It's really terrible. It's a real prison. And he says, I'm out of here. I don't want to. And they said, no, you can't leave. Once you're here, you're stuck. This is a real prison.
Well, since you got your hands in the air, why don't you play Frankenstein? 293, you can be the bride of Frankenstein. You stand here.
Prisoner 416 was soon subjected to the harassment of Dave Eshelman, nicknamed John Wayne because of his macho attitude.
416, and I want you to walk over here like Frankenstein and say that you love 293.
I made the decision that I would be as intimidating, as cold, as cruel as possible.
I love you, 293. Get up close. Get up close. I love you, 293. I love you, 293. You smile, 293. You get down here and do 10 push-ups. 2, 3.
I just watched a movie called Cool Hand Luke, and the mean, intimidating, Southern prison warden character in that film really was my inspiration for the role that I created for myself.
Why did you try to be obedient so much?
It's my nature to be obedient, Mr. Correctional.
You were lying. You were speaking lies.
He was creative in his evil. He would think of very ingenious ways to degrade, to demean the prisoners.
What if I told you to get down on that floor? And fuck the floor. What would you do then?
One of the best guards was also on that shift. And instead of confronting this bad guard, the sadistic guard, essentially, because he didn't want to see what was happening, he became the gopher. He would go out to get the food and things of this kind. And that left the John Wayne guard and another guard on that shift to be dominant.
We were continually called upon to act in a way that just is contrary to what I really feel inside. Just continually giving out shit is just really one of the most oppressive things you can do.
416, while they do push-ups, you sing Amazing Grace. Ready? Down. Amazing Grace. Push-ups on your own.
The madness of the experiment started to affect prisoner 416.
A wretch like me. Keep going.
I began to feel that I was losing my identity until finally I wasn't Clay. I was 416. I was really my number. And 416 was going to have to decide what to do.
Prisoner 416 decided to go on a hunger strike.
They were pushing my limits, but here was a thing that I could do that could push their limits. After I had missed a couple of meals, I saw that this was not a matter of indifference to the guards. I was making headway. They were upset.
I thought, how dare this newcomer come in and try to change everything that we had worked for the first 3 days to set up, and by God, he's going to suffer for that.
Get in that closet then.
Frustrated by his continued defiance, John Wayne threw prisoner 416 into the hole. After punishing the other prisoners for his disobedience, John Wayne encouraged them to vent their anger at 416 directly.
Thank you, 416. Okay, 209. Thank you, 416.
We would use our nightsticks to bang on the door, and we would kick the door so hard that, it must have, shaken him very seriously inside, scared the life out of him.
He yelled at me and threatened me and actually sort of smashed a sausage into my face to try to get me to open up. But I didn't have any intention of eating until I was out.
Okay.
416 should have been at some level a hero, because he's willing to oppose the authority of the system. In fact, the prisoners accept the guards' definition of him as a troublemaker.
I remember some of them saying, would you eat, goddammit? We're sick and tired of this. And, that was proof that, there was no solidarity. There was no support between the prisoners.
While 416 was still in the hole, John Wayne made a final attempt to break him by giving his fellow prisoners a choice. They could vote to release him by making a small sacrifice.
You can give me the blankets and sleep on the bare mattress, or you can keep your blankets and 416 will stay in another day. Now, what would it be? I'll keep my blankets. What will it be over here? I'll keep my blankets. How about 546? I'll give you my blankets, Mr. Correctional Officer. You don't want something. We got 3 today for keeping the blankets. We got 3, guess one. Keep your blankets. 416, you're going to be in there for a while. So just get used to it.
The study showed that power corrupts, and how difficult it is for people who are the victims of abuse to stand up and defend themselves. Why doesn't anybody who is being abused by a spouse or something like that just say, stop it? And we realize now that that's not as easy as it sounds.
By the end of the 5th day, 4 prisoners had broken down and been released. 416 was on the 2nd day of his hunger strike, and the experiment still had another 9 days to run. At this point, a fellow psychologist visited Zimbardo's basement prison and would witness the brutality of the experiment firsthand.
The guards had lined up the prisoners to go to the toilet, had bags over their head, chains on their feet, and were marching by. And I looked up and I saw this circus, this parade. And I said, hey, Chris, look at that.
I looked up and I just began to feel sick to my stomach. I had this just chilling, sickening feeling of watching this. And I just, I just turned away and I just let loose in this emotional tirade. I just lost it. I was angry scared. I was in tears.
And I'm furious. I'm saying, you're supposed to, we had a big argument. You're supposed to be a psychologist. This is this interesting dynamic behavior in such a few days. I'm going through this whole thing, the power of the situation. She says, no, it's that young boys are suffering and you are responsible. You're letting it happen. I said, oh my God, of course you're right.
The next day, Zimbardo ended the experiment. Studies like his stimulated heated debate about the ethics of using human subjects.
Clearly, young men suffered verbally, physically. Prisoners felt shame in their role. Guards felt guilt. So in that sense, it's unethical. That is, nobody has the right, the power, the privilege to do that to other people.
In the wake of experiments like Zimbardo's and Milgram's, ethical guidelines changed, introducing greater safeguards to protect participants. In the Stanford experiment, Zimbardo might have spared his volunteers distress had he not taken on a dual role in the study.
If I was going to be the prison superintendent, I should have had a colleague who was overseeing the experiment, who was in a position to stop it at any point, or I should have been the principal investigator and get somebody who was going to be the prison superintendent. I realized that was a big mistake, to play both those roles and be shifting back and forth.
After the experiment, Zimbardo brought all the participants together to talk about their experiences. John Wayne would now come face to face with the hunger striker he had tormented.
I was a little worried. I said, oh my God, he's really going to come down on me hard now, now that we're on equal footing.
It harms me. How did it harm you? How does it harm you? Just to think about it, you mean that people can be like that?
Yeah, it let me in on some knowledge that I've never experienced firsthand. Because I know what you can turn into. I know what you're willing to do.
When I look back on it now, I behaved appallingly. It's just horrid to look at. I think I tried to explain to him at the time that, what you experienced and what you hated so much was a role that I was playing, but that's not me at all.
I love you too, man.
He was trying to dissociate himself from what he had done. That did make me angry. Everyone was acting out a part and playing a role. Prisoners, guards, staff, everyone was acting out a part. It's when you start contributing to the script, that's you. And thus it's something you should take responsibility for.
I didn't see where it was really harmful. It was degrading, and that was part of my particular little experiment to see how I could.
Your particular little experiment.
Yes,
Why don't you tell me about that?
I was running little experiments of my own.
Tell me about your little experiment.
Okay.
I'm curious.
I wanted to see just that kind of verbal abuse that people can take before they start objecting, before they start flashing back.
If I have any regret right now, it's that, I made that decision, because it would have been interesting to see what would have happened had I not decided to force things. It could be that I only accelerated them, that the same things would have happened, but we'll never know.
If the extreme nature of Dave Eshelman's behavior tested the prisoners, it also presented the other guards with a choice, to intervene or not.
It surprised me that no one said anything to stop me. They just accepted what I said, and no one questioned my authority at all. And it really shocked me. Why didn't people, when I started to get, abuse people so much, I started to get so profane that, and still people didn't say anything.
There were a few guards who hated to see the prisoners suffer. They never did anything which would be demeaning of the prisoners. The interesting thing is none of the good guards ever intervened in the behavior of the guards who gradually became more and more sadistic over time. We like to think there is this core of human nature that good people can't do bad things and that good people will dominate over bad situations. In fact, one way to look at the Stanford Prison Study is that we put good people in an evil place and we saw who won. Well, the sad message is, in this case, the evil place won over the good people.
It did show some very interesting and maybe some unpleasant things about human behavior. It seems like, every century, every decade that we go through, we're suffering the same kind of atrocities. And, You need to understand why these things happen. You need to understand why people behave like this.
Okay, I know that was long, and some of you have been waiting for a nice long video for quite some time. There you go. Now you know. Zimbardo started out, he just wanted to see what would happen when he would put people in these contexts, and he wanted to see how people would behave when given these challenges. And I think that it wasn't a very good experiment, not just because of the ethical issues, but because, like we were discussing in the chat, there are so many confounding variables in this, right? Each individual personality is a variable, right? It's an activated variable. And I love this video as opposed to other versions of the Stanford Prison Experiments, because this really focuses on the implications of this study ethically. I think Philip Zimbardo's ability to talk about himself and be able to say, God, I really messed up. Like, I lost all objectivity, because he was also playing that role. Yes, that's what we're doing right now, Maddie. We are debriefing on this. So one of the amazing things is that we don't get to do this today. This is absolutely not available to us, okay? Which is a relief, which is an absolute relief.
Hi, sorry, Dr. Henderson. A couple of people are saying that they can't hear you very well, that you're really quiet.
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay.
Is that better?
Maybe they need to check their volume. Because my volume's up. Can everybody else hear me?
You just got louder.
Huh. Maybe there's something with this little box. Okay. All right.
Really quiet for a little bit, but now you're louder.
Excellent. Well, God forbid I'm quiet. So the point that I'm trying to make about the Stanford experiment is that it sucks as an experiment. And one of the reasons why we talk about it is that we talk about it as a cautionary tale and saying we don't ever want to do this to anybody else ever again. What those guards were put through and the personas that they took on, what the prisoners were put through, is really, really powerful. What you didn't see in that old video of the guard and the prisoner interacting is there was a few more clips where they had a few more guards and a few more prisoners, and all of the guards had a nonverbal domineering stance. All of them represented themselves as being bigger, right? Puffed out chests. A lot of them would stand up. Some of them would put their foot on one of the prisoners' chairs. And this is like back when they're back in their civilian clothes and they're supposed to be talking about this experiment and what they learned from it. This irrevocably changed everybody that was in that experiment. Absolutely. And I love that you all were talking about pulling in, like, we need to debrief this, right? One of our responsibilities as researchers, and mine as an educator, is to take time and say, acknowledge, right, the consequence of this experiment, and be able to say that this isn't available anymore. It doesn't happen. But in how many contexts right now in our culture do we see people taking advantages of different roles? As much as we want to believe that this is an experiment and it doesn't happen, the same righteous indignation, the same attitudinal contagion, the same personas get absorbed and they become part of somebody, and then they become almost weaponized. Whether it's, what's the common term y'all are using now? Toxic masculinity, right? That aspect, trauma. I mean, there are so many different things. Stanford Prison Experiment, while we're not, in a basement in Stanford anymore, we see this throughout our culture. And I think that calling awareness to this and pointing out the social roles and norms and the personas that people assumed, and the absolutism of these individuals when they got stuck in that singular site. That's another reason why I wanted you guys to take those assessments, to just see that being compassionate and being forgiving and understanding what our social constructs are and how they help us is really important. And we'll talk about the bystander effect next week, but always, always, always speak up, right? Somebody gets their runaway train sometimes with their rage and their anger and then their persona. But speaking up is one of the ways that we arrest that development when you can do so safely. My care and respect to you all. Enjoy your essay and or your weekly summary. Sorry, I used the word essay. And I look forward to seeing you folks on Monday for our final Monday together. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Bye.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you. I'm not gonna watch the movie on Netflix. It's
No, don't
it's
watch
too
the
freaky.
movie.
Yeah, it freaks.
No.
Oh God,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Thanks.
and it doesn't follow. It doesn't really take care of the science like it should. So
Okay, I kind of
yeah.
wondered if it would or would not, but
No, it doesn't.
and I didn't feel good, so I'm not in the big room today. But that I guess I'm talking to everyone, so you don't
Yes,
need to hear
yeah,
that.
everybody gets to
Okay.
know this. I think it's primarily just TAs left in the room.
Okay, that's cool.
All right.
It shook me up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Take
you.
care,
Have a
Mary.
good. Yeah, thank you. Bye now.
All right, TAs, thank you for manning the chat. You guys are doing an awesome job. I really respect and appreciate your reference referral or your research referrals, and then also your suggestions to take specific classes based upon students' curiosity. I think that that's a wealth of knowledge that you uniquely have, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you again so much for just being here and supporting me. I appreciate you. Have a great weekend and take good care of yourselves.